Hello, my name is Anthony, and this is my review for The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1. I'm going to start here by talking a little bit about the context behind my thoughts going into this episode and give my general impressions on the episode, and then I'll go more into specifics about why I felt the way that I did. Also, just to let you know, I am a little sick, so if my voice sounds a little different or if you hear random coughs or sniffles, that's why. So, with all that down, let's go ahead and get into this. So, for a bit of context, I have loved this show so far. I thought season 1 was great. I thought season 2 was even better, and I've really been looking forward to season 3, even though there's been over 2 years of time difference in between them. And in that time in between, we've had a few Star Wars shows that I have mixed opinions on. I thought the Book of Boba Fett was just terrible, which was also done by Favreau and Filoni, and I thought that was absolutely abysmal to watch, with the exception of the 2 Mandalorian episodes, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. I thought Obi-Wan was alright. I had very mixed opinions on Obi-Wan. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And then Andor, I completely loved Andor. I honestly think Andor is the best Star Wars show we've ever seen, even better than Mandalorian. So I've had high hopes for this season to kind of bring us back from that rocky couple of years back to the glory of the last 2 seasons. I was a little nervous to see that Rick Famuyiwa was directing this episode, because while I liked the episode he did in season 2, I really did not like the other 2 episodes that he did back in season 1. But it's still Favreau writing it. Usually I've liked his writing style, so I'm still optimistic about it. So I watched the episode. My general thoughts, in short, I was disappointed with this episode, which is really unfortunate because I was really looking forward to it. I wanted to love it, but I just thought it was a real letdown. There were a number of things in this episode that I thought were just kind of weird and out of place, or that just didn't make sense. The episode does a good job at setting up the story of what this season is going to be, but it fails to be a compelling story in and of itself, which is something that the other 2 season premieres were able to do fairly well. Despite being able to set it up well, this episode lacks anything to hook you into the story. Season 1 ended with the reveal of Grogu, this baby of Yoda's species that broke the internet. Season 2 similarly ended with that image of the back of Boba Fett. Then he turns around and you're like, Boba Fett's still alive. And both of those things really hook you into what this season is going to be. This one kind of it's just kind of there. It just sets up the storylines, but it doesn't hook you. I also have to say that you could really feel how short this episode was. This is not something new with this season. This is a constant issue that I've had with this show over the last 2 seasons, but you could really feel how short this episode was. So with those things down, now I'm just going to kind of walk through the events of the episode and break down what happened. And just to be completely clear, I will be talking in full spoilers from this point on, so you have been warned. We start the episode with this initiation of this child into their cult, and it does a really good job here at misdirecting the audience, because I was convinced that this was a flashback to Din's baptism or whatever this is supposed to be. And as the ritual happens, this giant crocodile comes out of the water and starts attacking the Mandalorians, and I couldn't help but wonder, like, you didn't know that thing was in there? Like, I'm assuming this is a place that you've been around for a while, considering you have your whole shop set up there and ritual is happening on this lake. Like, you didn't check it out. You didn't know that there was going to be a big sea beast in there, but whatever. It made for a very thrilling action sequence, and made for a very good introduction for Din into the fold here with his gorgeous chrome Naboo starfighter. Now I'm going to get to those 2 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. I am completely of the opinion that those 3 episodes really, if you want to count the finale too, but specifically episodes 5 and 6, that should have been the start of this season. Those would have been so much more interesting, and I would be singing a much different tune today if that is what I watched and not this. Plus, this show does a really bad job, this show meaning Mandalorian, does a really bad job at filling in the gaps if you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett. Because if you didn't watch it, then you're sitting there thinking, how is Grogu just back? This is still one of the weirdest decisions that a franchise has ever done, to undo the ending of season 2 in a completely different show and then just move on with it like normal. I'll stop going off about that, but that is something that still continues to bother me more and more. Moving on, we see Din have the exact same conversation with the armorer as he had in the Book of Boba Fett, about telling him he needs to bathe in the waters beneath the mines of Mandalore in order to reclaim his Mandalorian ship, and allegedly these mines are destroyed. So we have our main storyline for the season. He needs to go to Mandalore, go under the mines, get in the water, bathe in the water. He becomes Mandalorian again. He decides to go off to Navarro And on the way, there's actually some really nice father and son moments here of Din teaching Grogu, like, this is how you're a Mandalorian, you need to know how to navigate, you need to know how to fight, all blah, 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 blah. And as they're traveling on the way, you see Grogu look up, and you see these big shadows. And if you've watched Rebels, you know that these are the space whales from the end of that show. And I'm not gonna lie, I was not a big fan of the space whales in Rebels. It just didn't really work for me. So that did not garner much excitement from me. Give me one moment. Next, we see Din and Grogu back on Navarro, which now looks completely different. If you don't remember, that is where much of Season 1 took place, but it is now much more prosperous and expanded because of the High Magistrate, Greef Karga. This also kind of gives us a sense of the passage of time, which has kind of been ambiguous so far. Jon Favreau did an interview explaining that there's been a few years now that have taken place, which kind of, I guess, lines up in real life because there were, a couple years between the seasons here. So that kind of explains why this place was able to expand as much as it did. So we meet back up with Greef Karga, which it seems we have to do at least once a season. And I know a lot of people like his character, and I don't dislike his character. I just really feel like he's kind of an NPC here, just kind of giving information, and that's fine, but I don't love the character. So then they get to one of the more controversial things about this episode, and that is the whole Gina Carano thing. If you don't know, I'm not going to go into the whole thing. Disney fired Gina Carano over some insensitive tweets that she made that the company didn't align their views with. Some people think that was the right decision. Some people think that was the wrong decision. I'm not here to talk about that. But ultimately, she was removed from the show. And I think they did actually a very good job of dealing with that in the show itself. They don't kill her off. They don't recast her. They don't do something horrible to her. They just go with the natural progression of the story to say she was recruited by the New Republic because they liked the job that she did, and she's off doing that now. And then immediately they just go off and give us an update on Moff Gideon. He's in a cell somewhere. I assume he'll be back at some point. Then we see a group of pirates who are absolutely cartoonishly stereotypical bad guys that look like they're straight out of Clone Wars, which you'll get that with Dave Filoni. They're trying to go into the school and drink because I guess there used to be a bar there. Greef goes up to them, tells them, stand down, come to my office, get a drink with me. There's a bit of a standoff. Mando, very classic season 1, just kind of leaning there on the tree with his gun ready to go. Greef shoots the one in the hand, the other ones make a move. Din takes them all out, and Greef lets the other pirate go, which made me just roll my eyes and go, you cannot be dumb enough to think that he's just going to go, oh, I can't go back there. He shot my hand. Like, the excuse that Greef gave, saying, well, he's going to go back and tell people not to mess with Navarro. This is a different place now. No, he's a pirate. There's going to be some shenanigans there. And sure enough, later in the episode, he comes back, but we'll get to that later. Then we see Greef try to recruit Din to be sort of his enforcer, his right-hand man, but Din says, I can't, I have a mission. He says, I need IG-11, who right now is commemorated in a statue in Navarro. And Din says, I need this droid specifically because I trust him, and we know he has trust issues with droids. Greef says, well, it's not complete. There's parts of him in the statue, but that's not the whole thing. But they decide to go for it anyway. His head, torso, and arm are still intact, so they take that to work on it. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, hold on. In the season 1 finale, we watched him blow up from a bomb that was positioned in the middle of his chest. There is no conceivable way that his torso is intact. That just completely pulled me out of the episode. That this thing would still be intact and able to be brought online. Like, those wires should be obliterated inside of him. Whatever. That's the direction they decided to go. Also, as a side note, I think IG-11 would probably be kind of pissed off that they waited like 3 years to bring him back when they had the ability to do so the whole time, but I guess that's an issue for another time. So they bring him back online, and he kind of goes back to his original mission of gotta kill the child. And so he starts Terminator style going after Grogu. They say, we gotta take him out, and Greef pushes the statue of him down and smashes his head in, which again should destroy him, but it doesn't because apparently this droid is indestructible. And we get a horrible pun from Din saying, well, now that's using your head. Like, that was terrible. I usually like the humor in the show. Like, there's even in this episode, there's a number of good funny moments, like when Grogu's hugging the little thing and he said, that's not a pet. But this was just a bad joke that I just rolled my eyes at. And at this point, They take them to a bunch of little Anzellans, which, if you're not familiar, that's like Babu Frik in The Rise of Skywalker, which actually does make a lot of sense because this race is good at repairing droids. So if you need to repair your droid, take it to the Anzellans. There's a really funny shot here of Din sitting, like the camera goes wide and you see Din just like sitting there kind of hunched over with his head against the ceiling. I thought that was really funny. And basically they tell him he needs a part because it's destroyed and they need to get, so he has his memory chip basically. So that gives Din his next mission. So in case you're losing track here, he needs to bathe in the water beneath Mandalore. But in order to do that, he needs IG-11 to scan the poisonous surface. But in order to do that, he needs the new chip to get him online. So we got quest, side quest, side quest. This is what I mean. There's a lot of good setup here, but not a lot of good story here. Next, he goes off, and on the way, he encounters who else but the pirate that would never cause trouble again, who's back there. There's actually a really cool space chase sequence here, very reminiscent of Attack of the Clones or Empire Strikes Back, with the asteroid belt here. As usually happens in these, Din outsmarts them, he's victorious, except for the one that leads him directly to the big pirate ship. And we see who I assume is going to be a villain, not the villain, but a villain of the series, with the Pirate King, who looks like the illegitimate child of Swamp Thing and the Grinch. He's able to go into hyperspace, fly right over the ship, and he escapes. Then he goes to Bo-Katan, who is sitting by herself on the throne, stating that her people left her because she didn't have the Darksaber, so she couldn't lead them, and they're off being mercenaries now. Clearly not happy with the direction her life is going right now. And she basically tells him that his mission is folly, he's a fool, and gives him exact specific instructions on where to go, and then says, good luck, get out. So overall, this is not a terrible episode. This is not the worst episode of the show. But for a show that has been off the air for so long, that has built up so much excitement, I was hoping for a bit more from it. Despite that, I am still really looking forward to next week's episode. I'm still going to watch it as soon as I can. And when I do, I will give my full thoughts again, just like this. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today, and I will catch you next time. Take care.